Feared inside the ring and out, Scott Steiner was a professional wrestler whose reputation very much preceded him. While known as a ribber who may or may not have used his size and strength to intimidate others, if not outright take liberties with his opponents during the first half of his career, Steiner seemed to transform into something else entirely as he separated from his brother, went solo, and morphed into a different, decidedly more controversial character. His wild on-screen antics were mimicked off it, with backstage arguments, locker room brawls, and other transgressions giving Big Poppa Pump a menacing aura that stays with him to this very day. Along the way, he had various run-ins with the law, which at times threatened to derail his career. Scott Rex Steiner was born on July 29, 1962 in Bay City, Michigan. 14 months younger than older brother Robert, Scott followed his siblings' lead and took up amateur wrestling at Bay City Western High School. He was a standout athlete and earned a scholarship at the University of Michigan, becoming an NCAA Division I All-American wrestler for the Wolverines in 1986, placing 6th in the nation. As he had with amateur wrestling, Scott followed his brother Robbie, who performed as Rick Steiner, into professional wrestling. Trained by Dr. Jerry Graham Jr. in the original Sheik, Scott started out with the struggling Indianapolis-based WWA before joining Memphis territory CWA. As well as gaining valuable experience while he paid his dues for these low-paying leagues, Scott also innovated several moves, including the 450 Splash and Frankensteiner during these early years. Clearly loaded with potential, it was no great surprise to see him join Rick in WCW in early 1989. The brothers joined forces as a tag team and quickly set about establishing themselves as a force in the company's doubles division. With their blend of amateur mat-based wrestling, stiff strikes, and explosive power moves, the Steiners got over quickly in a big way. On November 1st, 1989, Rick and Scott won their first tag team championships when they defeated the Fabulous Freebirds to claim the NWA, later renamed WCW, World Tag Team titles. It was the first of many championships and accolades the brothers would enjoy both in the United States and overseas for New Japan over the course of the next decade or so. A proper tag team in every sense of the word, during the 90s the Steiners went from WCW to the WWF to ECW for a short spell and then back to WCW, all while maintaining a presence in the Far East. They had great matches with just about every duo they locked horns with and were able to work effectively as either babyfaces or heels. It was usually the former, as fans just couldn't help but be impressed by their routinely excellent physical displays and taken with their jocular charms. During this era, Scott was arrested twice for driving-related offenses. In May of 1995, he was arrested for driving with a suspended license in Bay County, Florida. Then, on July 26, 1996, he was arrested for speeding. Toward the end of 1997 and beginning of 98, Scott began to change things up a little in preparation for a singles run as a villain. He cut the mullet, grew out a goatee, and packed considerable muscle onto what was already a bulky frame. The switch was made at Super Brawl on February 22, 1998, as Scott turned on his brother to join the New World Order and officially become a bad guy. Dubbing himself Big Poppa Pump, Scott continued to tweak his image and attitude over the coming months. This on-screen amplification was seemingly reflected off it too, as it later emerged that Steiner had gotten himself into a bit of trouble in a regrettable and utterly needless incident on April 21st of that year. According to an article in the November 28, 1998 edition of Atlanta Journal-Constitution, Steiner was charged with threatening an Atlanta Department of Transportation worker before hitting the man with his Ford F-250 pickup truck 7 months prior. Per DOT worker Paul Casperine, who was directing traffic in South Cherokee that day, a white pickup with tinted windows pulled up to him early that afternoon. After Casperine told the driver, described as a man wearing a black t-shirt with cut-off sleeves that revealed a bodybuilder's physique, that the exit lane was closed, the driver climbed out of his vehicle and threatened Casperine to get out the way. He then got back into the pickup and allegedly said, "Move or I will run you over," before pulling forward and striking striking Kasparine, who informed the driver that the lane was closed, only to be struck by the pickup once again. Kasparine was not seriously hurt in the incident, but did report it to a sheriff's deputy at 1:40 p.m. that day. Charges were filed against Steiner, who had attempted to plead guilty in court. However, Steiner's attorney told Judge Michael C. Roach that his client did not believe that he had committed a crime and only pleaded guilty due to concerns that a jury would convict him because of his public persona, i.e. the rampaging character he portrayed on WCW television. Court papers indicated that prosecutor David Gaffney had agreed to recommend the judge put Steiner on probation for 5 years and pay restitution of $2,676. As a first-time offender, Steiner would not end up with a criminal record if he completed his probation. The judge questioned Steiner and, after hearing his answers, stated that his belief was that he was not guilty of terroristic threats if that's all you did. He did not like Steiner's tone and demeanor, however. Gaffney was also not satisfied with Steiner's answers and withdrew the plea agreement. Steiner was instructed to return to court a few weeks later, where he would either plead guilty again or go to trial charged with aggravated assault and making terroristic threats, which carried a maximum sentence of 26 years in prison. A more contrite Steiner returned to the courtroom on December 7th and once again pleaded guilty. This time, the judge accepted his plea as Steiner spoke in a low voice and with his head down. The case was then turned over to state officials who were to conduct an investigation and come up with a sentence. On March 17, 1999, Scott Steiner learned his fate. As well as being sentenced to 10 days in jail to be served across 5 weekends, not a consecutive 10 days, the Big Bad Booty Daddy was also ordered to carry out 200 hours of community service and pay $25,000 in fines, fees, and restitution. To top it off, he was put on probation for 7 years instead of the originally recommended 5. Per George's first-time offender rule, the conviction would be removed from Steiner's record so long as he didn't get into any trouble within those 7 years. In his professional life, things were looking good for the genetic freak. While WCW steadily declined, Steiner's position on the card got better, and it wasn't too long before he was a bona fide main eventer. Backstage, he was getting a reputation as a wild man with a short fuse who could be difficult to control, thanks to several incidents that saw him either lash out verbally, physically, or otherwise act in a way that was deemed to be unprofessional. Many of his colleagues, as well as WCW management, were afraid of him, and with good reason. Ric Flair certainly found out about Steiner's temper in early 2000. On the February 7th, 2000 episode of Monday Nitro, Big Poppa Pump cut an unscripted, vitriol-filled promo with the Nature Boy his primary target. Steiner had held a grudge against Flair since their WCW World Heavyweight title match at a Clash of the Champions special 9 years prior, accusing the Nature Boy of purposely sandbagging the match in an attempt to make him look bad and derail his push. Steiner's promo on Nitro, in which he called Flair the biggest ass-kissing, backstabbing, butt-sucking bastard in WCW, earned him a 2-week suspension with pay, which he was informed of when he arrived at the next day's Thunder taping. As he was leaving the building to start his paid vacation, Steiner saw Flair and chased him through the parking lot. Luckily for Slick Rick, Steiner either couldn't catch him or decided to leave it be, and things didn't turn physical. Things did turn physical many months later, however, when Steiner had a backstage fight with Diamond Dallas Page. DDP and Steiner had heat due to the manner in which Page's wife Kimberly had left the company that summer. According to reports, Kimberly refused to do an angle in which she would flash her breasts at the Big Bad Booty Daddy, which earned her such an earful from Steiner that she ended up quitting and later citing creative differences for her departure. Steiner went off script once again at the December 18th, 2000 Nitro taping and cut a promo on Dallas. When he got backstage, DDP confronted him about it and things quickly escalated. Long story short, Page sucker punched Steiner, was promptly double-legged to the floor, and it took several wrestlers to pry Scott, who was in the process of trying to remove DDP's eye, off of him. Page walked out of the taping following the incident, though he did end up returning and even worked a program with Steiner later on. As well as Flair and Page, the likes of J.J. Dillon and Terry Taylor, among others, bore the brunt of Scott's anger in the last couple of years of WCW's existence. Steiner was typically suspended, with pay of course, for his misdeeds, but suffered no other punishment. Sometimes he wasn't even reprimanded at all, presumably because everybody was afraid to set him off. The next time Steiner got in trouble with the law came not from something that happened away from the ring or even backstage, but stemmed from an in-ring angle that was part of the show. At the January 23, 2001 television taping, Steiner filmed an angle which saw him interrupt a match between Michael Modest and Christopher Daniels, attacking them and kayfabe breaking their legs. An EMT then entered the ring and Steiner attacked him too, striking him twice. The EMT, however, was not a trained actor or a wrestler masquerading as an EMT, but an actual medical professional named Randall Mankins. He had agreed to be part of the angle and entered the ring as instructed, but was not aware that Steiner would physically attack him. The 34-year-old chose to press charges, and Steiner was arrested the next morning while attempting to board a flight home from Greensboro, South Carolina. Deputies did comment that Steiner was very nice to them as they came to arrest him. According to Steiner, he had assumed that the EMT was a local indie guy and not the real deal, and blamed a miscommunication within WCW management for the incident. Nonetheless, a March trial date was scheduled for Steiner on charges of criminal assault. In the end, common sense prevailed and the charges were dropped after it was determined that Steiner genuinely believed it was an actor he was kicking, not an EMT. For what it's worth, several within WCW felt like Mankins was attempting to exploit the situation for monetary gain. After WCW kicked the bucket, things went relatively quiet as far as Scott Steiner was concerned. His subsequent WWE run was considered a major disappointment overall, but the man kept himself out of trouble. The next time fans heard about Steiner getting into a spot of bother with the authorities was in December of 2005, when he, Buff Bagwell, and Lex Luger were removed from a flight from Minneapolis to Winnipeg, where they were scheduled to wrestle on a pay-per-view for the Action Wrestling Entertainment promotion. Bagwell claimed they were ribbing a flight attendant who freaked out and called airline police over the disturbance. They ended up on the next flight, however, and made it to Winnipeg. When they got there, Bagwell, Luger, Steiner, and independent wrestler April Hunter were held at customs for an extended period of time. All besides Luger, who was flagged for an outstanding arrest warrant for a drug charge in Georgia, were allowed to enter the country, while the luckless Lex was sent back to Minneapolis and arrested. It would take close to a decade, save for a speeding ticket for driving 20 miles an hour above the limit in February of 2009, for Steiner to get in trouble with the law again. According to reports, on March 26, 2015, Steiner confronted Hulk Hogan's then-wife Jennifer Bollea at the baggage claim at San Jose Airport. The two had been flying to San Jose for WrestleMania weekend-related activities and happened to be on the same flight together. Bollea claimed that Steiner informed her he was going to kill Terry the next time he saw him. Jennifer, who didn't know who Steiner was and was shaken by the unprovoked confrontation, called her husband, who immediately flew out to meet her. The next day, the couple filed a report with the San Jose Police Department. Hogan also demanded that WWE keep Steiner away from the company's Hall of Fame ceremony on March 28th, as well as WrestleMania 31 on the 29th. Pictures of Steiner were distributed to security personnel at the Hall of Fame ceremony, where they were instructed that under no circumstances was the former WWE Tag Team Champion allowed in the building. San Jose Police, meanwhile, pulled airport CCTV footage of the alleged confrontation between Steiner and Mrs. Bollea and began investigating him for potential felony terroristic threats. Speaking with TMZ, Steiner admitted that he did talk to Jennifer, but claimed that he didn't threaten her or Hogan. In his version of events, he simply vented to her about WWE's decision to have Hogan induct Macho Man Randy Savage into the Hall of Fame, given the infamously tempestuous relationship between the former megapowers. He also said that police were right there at the airport, and if she felt threatened, then she should have gone up to them and said something. 2 years later, during a media conference call to promote Impact Wrestling's 2017 Slammiversary pay-per-view, Steiner noted that nothing ultimately came of the incident. He said that his lawyer had called the San Jose Police Department to explain things and that the CCTV footage further proved his innocence. Since that brush with the law in 2015, Steiner has been quiet. He was witness to an attempted murder shooting at a Hardee's restaurant in Ackworth, Georgia in April of 2016. A resident of the area who owned a Shoney's restaurant there, Steiner was interviewed by a local news crew and spoke about the incident on television, with reporters seemingly unaware of his celebrity. As far as crimes that Steiner himself may or may not have committed, there has been nothing to report for a while now. Apparently mellowing with age, Steiner is now in his early 60s, Freakzilla has also been slowed down by health issues, including a scary life or death situation he managed to pull through in 2020. Steiner collapsed backstage at an Impact Wrestling taping that March and had to be rushed to the hospital, where he underwent a procedure on his heart. The man who struck fear into the hearts of fans, colleagues, and members of the general public is now pretty much retired. His stance on certain topics has softened so much that in 2022, he accepted an invitation to be inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame, an honor he had previously derided as being of zero merit. Yet there he was, gleefully posing with Triple H, a man he had continually slammed during interviews for the best part of 2 decades. There was still trepidation about giving Scott Steiner a live microphone during his induction, of course, because no matter how much he may have matured in recent years, there is still a loose cannon in there somewhere just waiting to go off.